Oh, thank you. To increase the stringency of the ZEV requirement of their rules. And they hope to have that impact model year 2026. So if you're interested in learning more about what California is doing, you can look for the rulemaking that CARB, California Air Resources Board, is doing. We are not the only state that is interested in adopting California's clean car standards. In fact, 16 more or less already have the rules in effect or are currently adopting them. The states shown here in blue have already adopted them. The speckled Minnesota just got their rules approved in May of this year, and they'll go into effect starting with model year 2025. And those states shown in green, including us, New Mexico, are in the process of adopting the rules. And together, the states that have already adopted the rules make up 40% of the new vehicle market. So that covers quite a bit of the states in volume, even though it doesn't cover much of the states geographically.
So I'm going to pick it up here, Claudia. So while Claudia brought to your attention what's going on in the state of California, and let you know that other states in the country are also moving forward with the California standards, the federal government's taking action right now under the Biden administration. And they recently announced their own vehicle standards and their effort to reduce emissions, greenhouse gas emissions from vehicles nationwide. This would apply nationwide. They've got a couple proposals that people can comment on, one more stringent than the other. They can begin in model year 2023, which is much earlier than individual states can begin adopting more stringent standards pursuant to the California standards. If you would like to comment on that, those comments are due by September 27th. The state of New Mexico will be providing comments on those rules. We are supportive of what the federal government and EPA is doing. In conjunction with that, there's the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration is also moving forward with improvements to efficiency. And they are looking forward to an 8% annual increase in the corporate average fuel economy for all light duty vehicles being sold in the country. And that will begin with model year 2024 and go through model year 2026. So as New Mexico is moving forward with its clean car rules, we need to be mindful of what's happening at the federal level and what's happening at the state's level, including California. And we're considering all of that as we move through this process. Next slide, please. We want to make sure it's clear to you all that we're working collaboratively with the city of Albuquerque. We've mentioned this before at our last meeting, but the city and Bernalillo County have a separate jurisdiction from the rest of the state, the state's air quality program. It's the only local government that has their own air quality program. So we are moving hand in glove with them as we develop these rules so that we'll have one set of rules that will apply in Bernalillo County and the state, though it will be enforced and have separate requirements, potentially with compliance in both the state and the city, that we're going to line those up as closely as we can. So we're working very closely with them to develop one set of rules, and we intend to go forward and have a single hearing in front of our separate regulatory boards. For the state, we would go in front of the Environmental Improvement Board, and for the city, they would have their Air Quality Control Board. We'd like to have a joint hearing. We did that once before quite successfully in 2007, and we think that it makes sense to do that again so that if we need to make any tweaks during the hearing, we'll still have identical rules applying to the state and to the local board. I also want to point out the tribal lands that are highlighted in brown on this map here, and make it clear that the state, neither the state nor the city program has jurisdiction on tribal lands. So whatever rule we come up with will not apply to any vendors on tribal lands. Next slide, please. So both the state and the local board have current authority under state law to move forward with a California standard. Our Air Quality Control Act already provides that. It does require us, of course, to be consistent with federal law. And so we'd have to be consistent with the Federal Clean Air Act, and we have every intention of doing that. So the federal law prohibits the states from creating their own vehicle standards. You can either have a federal standard or a California standard. You can't have a third vehicle standard. And so as we move forward with this rulemaking, we need to make sure that we're very careful not to do that. Yes, the Federal Clean Air Act allows California to adopt more protective vehicle standards with a waiver from the US EPA. We anticipate that coming. And the Federal Clean Air Act allows the states to choose between the federal standard and the California standard. And we made that choice a few years ago, back in 2007. That was rolled back. And so we're doing it again. We're going to move forward once again with the adoption of the California standards. Next slide.
Okay, so now we're going to describe a little bit more what these standards are. We talked about there are two different parts. First, the low emission vehicle standards. If I use LEV sometimes, I apologize, but that is what I mean, low emission vehicle standards. So in these standards, each manufacturer must meet a statewide fleet average tailpipe emission for greenhouse gas emissions, criteria air pollutants, and certain hazardous air pollutants. It applies to new light and medium duty vehicles like passenger cars, light duty trucks, medium duty passenger vehicles. It applies to new vehicles offered for sale in New Mexico. In our case, it'll begin for model year 2026 if our timeline plays out the way we hope it will, which goes into effect in calendar year 2025. You know, if you dive into this process, it's good to know that the model years are always 1 year ahead of the calendar year. The requirements vary depending if the manufacturer is a small volume, medium volume, or large volume as determined by the sales in New Mexico. They become more stringent over time, which results in consistent incremental progress towards cleaner cars. Here are the requirements that the zero emission vehicle standards requires auto manufacturers to comply with. Again, this is auto manufacturers and their delivery requirements to the state of New Mexico where their vehicles are offered for sale. It can be a little confusing, so I'm just going to walk you through this. So the credit requirement increases over time and is expressed as a percentage, but the percentage does not equal number of vehicles. Instead, different cars get different points in this percentage, in this credit system, depending on just how well they do at having zero tailpipe emissions and a good range. So the maximum points a car can receive is 4 points. If it has a range over 350 miles and doesn't use any gasoline, is all on an alternative fuel source. And then other cars like plug-in electric hybrids might get a fraction of 1 point. In the third column to the that with the numbers in red, we can see more or less how the credit requirement translates into actual vehicle sales. So you can see that, for example, before I mentioned the model year and the offset with the current year. So we're in the current year, calendar year of 2021, which is the same as model year 2022. So the current requirement is 14.5%. which is about the equivalent of a 4.6% actual car delivery requirement. In the last column over here, we can see what the New Mexico sales numbers have been. The past 4 years, below 1%, and then last year, right around 1%. So we can see that the state of New Mexico is not quite at the 3.8% it could have been last year, or we don't know where it is yet, but it's not likely to be at 4.6% this year. And we have to think about how do these rules help us achieve the 7 to 9% vehicle sales that will be required in the year that these rules take effect, which will be in model year 2026, calendar year 2025. The good news is I think there's many reasons to be optimistic that this gap between the 1% and the 7 and 9% can be reached. And that's what we'll talk about in the next couple of slides. So for one thing, the California rules provide a lot of flexibility in how the manufacturers can reach that 7 to 9%. They can develop and deliver the zero emission vehicle, the qualifying vehicles themselves. They can purchase credits from others. They can carry back or use credits they have previously banked. And they can carry forward bank credits for future years. So the standards themselves already have a lot of opportunities for vehicles to meet, for manufacturers to meet that requirement. The standards do not dictate exact numbers, vehicle types, or locations. Another thing working in favor of reaching these goals, these standards, are the actual numbers of plug-in electric vehicle sales. So this is a graph that shows going from 2010, December of 2010 in the far left, all the way to the first quarter of our current year, 2021, and shows that electric vehicles were on the, sales were on the rise. Then we've got a big dip during the COVID years, and that beginning this spring, sales exceeded any previous year's sales. So the public is getting increasingly interested in purchasing electric vehicles. So that's the second reason that we're feeling optimistic about the standards we're setting. And the third would, whoops. I'm sorry.
Claudia, are you finished with that slide?
I think that I was just supposed to say more on the slide. Anyway, so before I advance the slide, let me just make one more comment. The third is that you may all have heard that almost all of the large manufacturers and the smaller manufacturers are fully on board with producing models that run on alternative fuel. You've probably heard about Ford and their Ford Lightning pickup truck, fully electric. It's coming out in the fall of this year. Manufacturers like Volvo have committed to being producing only electric vehicles by 2030. Every single major car manufacturer has set goals for themselves on the number of electric vehicles they are planning to bring to market in this decade. All right. So now this is for you, Sandra.
And Claudia, I just might add to what you were saying about, the reasons to be optimistic. And while the federal government won't have a ZEV mandate like it's in the California standards, they are pushing to bring more EVs to market, and they are working with the manufacturers to make that happen. So that's the other reason to be optimistic. So as we noted, there are many restrictions in the California standards, meaning we don't have a lot of flexibility in those rules in what we can and cannot adopt, but we have some flexibility, and we wanted to highlight those for you right now to let you know areas of the rule that we will be looking for comment on once we get the draft rule out. And we're putting this out now, so maybe you can think about it. We've already received some comments on this, but we just want to highlight where the state and the local government has some flexibility. And one is on the use of early credits for ZEV. So manufacturers can receive credits for new battery and electric vehicles and plug-ins delivered for sale before the compliance period begins. So say in model year 2024 and model year 2025, it's possible that we can account for those vehicles in the state of New Mexico and use those during the compliance period to make it easier to meet that requirement. The other area is one-time proportional credits, where we can give, where the manufacturers get credit to use instead of delivering ZEV. Each manufacturer would receive credits based on the balance of their California ZEV credit bank and scale that to New Mexico overall sales. The state of Nevada reached an agreement with some of the manufacturers and some of the NGOs, and we're looking at that to see if that's an option for New Mexico. And we may put that, consider that as we move forward with our rules as well. Next slide, please. So other items that we will be seeking feedback on are things like fees. You know, what kind of fees do we need to collect in order to cover the cost of the program? How about the reporting requirements? How can the department and the city of Albuquerque coordinate on the reporting requirements? We have two separate air jurisdictions, but we want to make sure we act like a single state when meeting the percentage requirements in the California rules. So how do we manage that? How can the state and the city collaborate to maximize compliance and oversight, yet minimize the administrative responsibility and the administrative burden? So these are a few areas that are not necessarily required or mandated in the California rule where we do have flexibility. And when you see our draft rule, we're hoping that we'll get comments from you all on that. We're already starting to get comments from folks on these areas. Next slide, please. And so we went through this slide last time, but we want to do it again for this second public meeting because I think it's very helpful to dispel some of the myths about the clean car rules. And one is that it does not apply to existing vehicles or to used vehicle sales. It does not apply to off-road or heavy-duty vehicles like farm equipment. It does not require any additional emissions testing. You know, for residents in Bernalillo County, you have your emissions testing requirements already. This will not add on to that in Bernalillo or outside of Bernalillo. Does not require anybody to purchase an electric vehicle. It does not ban the sale of SUVs or pickup trucks, and it will not increase taxes or costs to consumers. What it does do will reduce greenhouse gases in the state of New Mexico. We anticipate we will eliminate 2 million tons of CO2 by 2030, and will help us meet our emission reduction targets that the governor set out in Executive Order 2019-03. It will also apply to light and medium duty vehicles for sale in New Mexico. It will improve air quality for New Mexicans. As you may know, we're struggling to meet ozone standards in a number of counties in the state of New Mexico, as well as Bernalillo County. And this will help us reduce pollutants that cause ozone. We'll also provide consumers more options. We'll get more vehicles in the state that you hadn't seen before because this requirement hasn't been in place. So you'll have lower emission vehicles, you'll have more zero emission vehicles, more plug-ins, more plug-in hybrids. You're not mandated to purchase those zero emission vehicles, but that option will be made available to you. Next slide.
Yeah, so before I address the slide, I want to just build on something that Sandra said about consumer choice. Right now, there's about 36 EVs available, and many of those are not readily available in New Mexico because manufacturers right now receive credit for delivering those vehicles in those blue states in the map that I showed previously. And so sometimes it can be really hard to actually buy in New Mexico a vehicle that might be of interest. So having these rules means that manufacturers are incentivized to deliver those newer cars and the newer technology to the state. And similarly, also, by the time these rules go into effect, the Consumer Reports anticipates that there's going to be over 100 electric vehicles available by 2025. So if these rules are not adopted, the chances that we'll get to select from those 100 is lessened. All right, so, and moving on to our schedule. So we are in the process of having informational sessions now. We'll have several more of these. Feel free to also type in the chat and let us know if there's particular information that you'd like to see presented at future informational sessions. We're going to finalize the draft rules in November and circulate discussion drafts for consideration and comment. And then we hope to file the rulemaking petition before our two boards in December. We're going to request that the air boards have a joint hearing in May. And then in the late summer of 2022 is when the boards will make the decision, and then and publishing of the final rule in the New Mexico Register in the fall. As we've said several times, states are required by the Clean Air Act to give a 2-year waiting period from the time when they adopt the rules until they go into effect. So 2 years later, from October of 22, pretty much puts us at the beginning of 2025 for when these rules will go into effect in New Mexico. There's many opportunities for you to stay informed. I think that hopefully many of you heard about this because you got an email from eDelivery. If you didn't, please, from an e-bulletin from GovDelivery. So let us know if you didn't and would like to hear about our meetings that way. Perhaps you got a press release from the state. No matter how you heard about it, we have a new website, which is the New Mexico enmv.nm.gov/the-road-to-clean-cars-New Mexico. I suppose all of you who have, I can see the screen, can follow that. So please do look at our website. We'll be posting the slide presentations there, as well as the recorded meeting today. The city of Albuquerque also has a website, which is also here on your screen. You also feel free to follow us on social media. Our Twitter handle is @NMENVDPT. And I'm sure that you can find us on Facebook too, should you be looking for us. Let's see, I think that was the last slide. Although you can also, we're welcome. You're welcome to invite us to your meeting. Ken is in the meeting today with the Coalition of Sustainable New Mexico Communities, and he has invited us to attend their organization's meeting soon. If you have an organization that you would like us to present at, we're happy to do that. We can do a much shorter presentation than this. We can touch on the highlights that you want us to talk about. It'll be a chance for you and the members of your organization to give us some feedback. You can also comment on our draft rules, like Sandra encouraged you to do. You can make comments during our formal rulemaking process. We always appreciate support, written and oral report during testimony during our rulemaking. All right. Here's our contact information, mine, as well as that of Dario with the city of Albuquerque. Again, I can put that in the chat. Actually, my email address is at the end of my name. And then now it is our turn to hear from you. So I've noticed that there have been some comments in the chat, and we also want to, you can also let us know that you'd like to speak or ask a question by raising your hand. I think that means that I'm going to end the presentation and we'll be in gallery view. And before I go, I want to just thank everybody who has tuned in today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being interested in the rulemaking we're doing here. And we look forward to more conversation. Oops. I need to stop sharing my screen.
Okay, so I see that Ken has his hand raised. And before we jump into Q&A, I would like to remind everyone that if you need help figuring out where to raise your hand, at the bottom of your screen, there's something that says reactions and it has a smiley face with a plus. That's where you can raise your hand. So I see that Ken has his hand raised. Ken, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Sure, thank you. Claudia and Sandra, thank you for the presentation. I have a couple of questions. Claudia, at the beginning you mentioned by following California rules, if anything changes within the state of California, we're beholden to those changes. Can you talk to us a little bit about why we're implementing or adopting California rules instead of creating something that's unique to New Mexico?
Yeah, let me sure, I'm not muted. Thank you, Ken. So if I said that we are adopting California's rules, no matter what they're gonna do with their rules, then I misspoke and I apologize for that. So we will be adopting the rules as they stand today in California. California is going through another rulemaking to, their first set of rules are called Advanced Clean Cars 1, and the second set is now Advanced Clean Cars 2, and they, and what we are proposing with these rules is only the rules that are on the books right now, Advanced Clean Cars 1. We cannot adopt, by New Mexico statute, we can adopt rules on a blank slate as to what they might become in California. So that's the first part of the question. And the question about whether we might want to adopt other rules that are unique to New Mexico. The Clean Air Act doesn't allow us to do that. We have two choices: follow the federal standard or follow California's standard. And so we don't have that choice.
Thank you, Claudia. Can you also explain, at least for me, what the how a statewide fleet average for tailpipe emission is calculated, basically the statewide average? How is that calculated?
So a greenhouse gas emission standard is set, and this is calculated individually by each manufacturer. So all the cars that a single manufacturer delivers to the state must, on average, meet that greenhouse gas emission. So you have some cars that have less emission, some cars that have more. So it's kind of like a seesaw. As long as it levels out at that average by manufacturer.
By manufacturer, okay. That's the key. That's what I was looking for. So thank you for that. As far as credits, I'm new to as far as credits. So can you talk to us of who determines the credit requirements for each vehicle and who maintains those records of which manufacturer has X amount of credits and for swapping, et cetera?
Yeah, so in a lot of ways, we're fortunate that a lot of the heavy lifting is done by California because these are their regs. So each model made by any manufacturer is assigned a value based on the criteria, which are basically called city electric driving. The amount of driving the car can do in a city setting without any tailpipe emissions. And so every single car, you could look it up on the California's website, already has a value assigned to it, whether it's less than 1 or all the way up to 4.
Okay.
The individual manufacturers will be responsible for reporting their the vehicles that they have delivered for sale in New Mexico in a database that will then be used for determining their compliance to these standards.
Interesting. Okay, thank you. 2 more questions, Claudia.
I'm going to hold you to that.
Some of our dealers are asking if the draft rules provide for any penalties for noncompliance. And the reason for that is oftentimes an individual dealership may not have control of the vehicles that the manufacturer allocates to them. So they're saying, for example, the 7 to 9% goal, if the manufacturer doesn't provide those vehicles to maintain that inventory, are there any penalties that they have to worry about?
Thank you for that question. I want to first say I'm going to learn more about that myself, and
Okay.
secondly say that I'm fairly sure, that these rules are a manufacturer's requirement. So the dealers, I want to check on this, should not be getting, have compliance action against them when it's not they're not the point of regulation. It's the manufacturers the point of regulation. Maybe Sandra wants to, I can jump in there and add.
Yeah, okay. And if not, Claudia, if Sandra's not, I don't see her, but maybe it's additional research, but I thought that was an interesting comment from our dealerships as I'm visiting with them.
Thank you.
Last question is on your timeline for the rulemaking process. I didn't see where the period would be or the timeline for public comments, either oral or written. Where are we looking at that in that timeline, that slide that you provided, the sequence of events?
That's a great question. And let me let Sandra answer that question as well as if she has anything else to add to the previous.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. Ken and Claudia, I don't have anything to add on the compliance issue, but it's my understanding it's the manufacturer is responsible for making those deliveries to the state. Yeah. And our intention, Ken, is to get a draft rule out next month and have an informal kind of draft discussion with stakeholders on that. Have another, put it out there for a couple weeks, have another public meeting, get feedback that way, get feedback in written comments, have individual meetings with people who want to meet with us about those draft rules prior to filing it in December for the board. Now, there's another opportunity at that point to provide additional comments. The upfront informal discussion draft comments will help us just do a better job of making sure the language is right or as right as possible prior to filing. But I want you to be sure you know there's additional opportunities after filing the language with the board to provide additional comments. And then even after that, if you want to petition the board and present technical testimony or provide public comment in front of the board, you can do that as well. So there'll be multiple opportunities to provide comment. The first opportunity will be after we get the draft out sometime next month.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Claudia. And thank you guys for making yourselves available to discuss all of these things offline with me as well, as we're trying to get a handle on this. I appreciate it. That's all I have, Claudia.
Okay, so next up is Linda Birchfield. Linda, go ahead and unmute yourself and then ask your question. Thank you.
I don't have a question. I was going to speak, so I can wait.
Great. Oh, that's okay. Also fine. Yep.
Oh, okay. I'll go ahead. I'm a big fan of plug-in cars. I had a Chevy Volt plug-in hybrid when I lived in Virginia, but it could not handle the snow in Santa Fe. I researched and found that the Subaru Crosstrek plug-in hybrid was perfect for my needs. I could buy it in many states, but not New Mexico. I would much rather have paid my $30,000 in New Mexico, but had to go to California. Also had to pay to have it shipped here. Handling maintenance issues is another headache because no auto mechanic in New Mexico is trained in plug-in vehicles. So the local Subaru dealer has been calling Subaru customer advocacy to get information. Now, people have heard of Teslas, but very few are aware of how many car manufacturers are updating their fleet with plug-ins. People stop me in the parking lot to ask where I bought my electric vehicle because they want one. I tell them that unfortunately I had to go out of state. I encourage you to petition for the updated Clean Car Rule as soon as possible. I urge you to adopt a standard that includes early action credits and limits use of proportional credits in the rulemaking. And in your petition, please include advanced clean truck standards. Thank you. And thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Linda. So next up, I'm going to go to Athena Christodoulou.
Thank you, and thank you for this presentation. And I am going to not repeat what Linda said, because that actually is what I'd like to be saying. I couldn't get a plug-in Prius, but my question is, are the new federal standards more stringent than the California standards are now?
So Athena, we don't know what the feds are going to do yet. They have 2 sets of tailpipe standards that they put out there for comments, right? And so we are advocating for the more stringent federal standards, and we're letting EPA know that through our written comments. But until we know what they finally settle on, we can't tell you. And I haven't done the analysis yet on the California standards. We're kind of waiting for the feds to come forward with what their final proposal will be. But I can tell you that the feds don't have a ZEV mandate, right? So when you talk about feds being more stringent, we know it's only with tailpipe emissions. It's not with the ZEV mandate. They're encouraging ZEV. They're working with the manufacturers to make sure everybody has more options for purchasing zero emission vehicles, but there's no federal mandate requiring ZEV like the California standards. So California will be more stringent in that aspect.
Okay, and the next question is, are you aware that New York has mandated that they are going to go to zero gas vehicles being sold in their state by 2035?
I know that that's a target for California, that they're looking at that. We're waiting anxiously to see what the California rules will be, the second set. We're adopting the Advanced Clean Car 1. We're waiting to see what's in the Advanced Clean Car 2, like a lot of people are wondering what California is going to do next.
Okay, and the last thing is a comment. I just want to invite everybody to the September 25th electric car show in Albuquerque at the zoo. That's on September 25th, and it's from 10 to 1 a.m. I'm sorry, p.m. Not that late.
I want to support you guys in doing that. I really appreciate it. I used to be involved with those when I worked at the county. And there's also one in Taos, and there's one in Santa Fe. In case you don't, not one in Santa Fe?
Not one in Santa Fe. They had to cancel.
Okay, there's one in Taos, in case that's closer for you, depending on where you live. And I would also, at the last one, I was lucky enough to have one of the Tesla drivers let me drive his car. So, if that's of interest, maybe you can find someone who'll do that.
Great, thank you, Athena. And if you want to share that in the chat with me, I can share the information for that car show out to everyone so that it's written down for everyone. And that's really, really cool that that's happening. So next I have a question from the chat from Jake McCook. What is NMED and the Lujan Grisham administration doing to support state level EV tax credits to help New Mexicans offset the cost of EVs as these rules come into effect?
There was a bill that was supported by the governor in 2019 for EV tax credits, and that unfortunately didn't pass. don't know that anything's coming up this legislative session. We do have our eyes on the federal tax credits. However, the reconciliation package does have a fair amount of money set aside for EV tax credits. So I'd put my money on the federal government at this time until we see what's going to happen in this upcoming 2022 legislative session in New Mexico.
Thank you. And Claudia, is there anything you would like to add to that? Okay, great. So next up is Erin Kressig. Erin, you can go ahead and make your statement or ask your question.
Hi, thank you for hosting this and giving a nice presentation with some good visuals. Really appreciate that. I had just a couple of questions sort of into the thought process for you all as you move forward. My first question was, I heard someone else, I think Linda mentioned this, and I know there were a number of conservation organizations that submitted some comments on this, but are you thinking of including any of the clean trucking rules that have come from CARB as you move forward, considering the LEV and ZEV standards at this time?
Yeah, thanks, Erin, for that question. And are you with Western Resource Advocates?
I am, yes. So
yeah,
introduce myself that way.
You. I haven't met you yet, I don't think. Yes, we received a letter from a number of advocates on that. We've talked with some advocates on that. We are considering whether to pursue that and the timing of that. We're not certain if we'll do it with this initial regulatory change in 2022. We have our eye on the California standard ACC2, and we may include it with that package, but we are looking at it. We are seeing how that might work in New Mexico. We've also met with Nikolai Manufacturing, and they're very interested in the state adopting the advanced clean truck rule.
Okay, thank you for that. And that actually is a great segue to my next question, which is about the ACC2 rules. You said that you might be thinking about doing those rules with advanced clean trucks potentially. I know none of this is set in stone, but I was curious if you had any sense of the timing with that, with it being kind of an interesting time to be adopting the ACC1 rules, with those kind of reaching the end of their, but by the time that this would be potentially implemented, it would just affect the last model year of the existing rules. So had you been sort of thinking to the next step in adopting ACC2, and if so, what's a potential timeline that you're considering?
Yeah, we are considering ACC2. To us, it makes sense, but we want to see what's in those rules, right? We're not going to blindly say we're adopting the next set of California standards. We need to see what's there, but we're very interested in that. When the governor signed Executive Order 2019-03, she made it clear that she wanted the state to be evaluating the California standards, and we're doing that. And we're moving forward with ACC1, and we will consider ACC2. We're also hoping that ACC2 won't start until 2027 model year. We know there's been lots of talk about 2026. We know there's issues with states like New Mexico and the other 177 states, or the non-California clean car states, and how they are going to move forward that because of the timing. They may not have enough time to do that. So that's just another piece of the puzzle that we have to keep our eye on. We have to keep our eye on the federal rules, ACC2, not just their content, but when those rules might start. And we will continue to engage with you all as we get more information. I hope you do the same with us so that we can make good decisions on how to move forward with our regulatory process.
Okay, thank you very much for those responses. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Erin. And next up we have Bud Bergman. Bud, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and make your statement or ask your question.
Great, thank you. And thanks for hosting this webinar today. Very interesting. As we go about adopting new lower emission rules and electric vehicles in our state, is there any kind of parallel path where we're thinking how to build out the infrastructure like of charging stations, because that's the one thing right now, and I'm just your average citizen, it's the one thing right now that's preventing me from buying an electric vehicle is I'm unsure of the infrastructure around. So maybe somebody can address that. Thank you.
Yeah, Bud, we do hear that. Again, we're, pretty excited if we can get this reconciliation package through to get additional funding into New Mexico as well as other states to construct more infrastructure. We're trying to do our part. We have a clean car corridor with alternative fuels, that's being recognized. And in the environment department, we are allocating as much funding as we can from the Volkswagen settlement to additional infrastructure and looking at infrastructure that is in places that don't already have it. How many charging stations do you need in Santa Fe? Maybe we've got enough, and maybe we need a few more in Raton, or we need a few more in Deming. So we're putting our Volkswagen money there, but we need to do more. And I think the country as a whole needs to do more. And I feel like we are somewhat on the precipice of having a larger expansion with clean vehicles and the infrastructure.
Okay, thank you.
But if I might, I just want to add a little bit to that. I hear you. I know exactly what you're talking about, especially if you're a one-car household, right? It's sometimes easier to have an electric vehicle be part of your own personal fleet if it's not the only car you have. There are studies out there that show that that even if you were to rent a car for the time that you travel, if you travel, like most average Americans, and then plug in mostly at home for the travel, the average American travels less than 39 miles a day. It's still more cost effective to buy an electric vehicle and to charge it at home than it is to buy an ICE. So it's just something in case you hadn't heard.
Audio is camera.
Sandra, I think you may be frozen. It might be helpful to turn off your video. I think we may have lost Sandra. Claudia, are you still there?
Like Claudia's frozen too. they're freezing one at a time here.
Dario, are you still on the call?
Yes, I am. I'm still on.
Hi. Okay, good. Well, that's good. So I'm going to see if I can get Sandra and Claudia back on the call. I want to make sure that we answer everyone's questions thoroughly. So just 1 second. I want to remind everyone also that if you have a chance, make sure to join our GovDelivery. We send updates when we have meetings like this and other updates that are relevant to the clean car making. I see Claudia's back on. Hi, Claudia. And we're still waiting for Sandra, but there's Sandra. Hi, Sandra, we're back. Yay,
hey,
great.
I don't know what happened. Was it me?
It was both of you at once. I don't know.
Well, it's the hazards of remote meetings, right?
This is true.
I think Claudia was finishing up her response to Bud's question about infrastructure, but maybe
Yeah, I didn't quite hear the end of that, Claudia. If you want to maybe just repeat the last one or two things that you were saying.
Sure. I guess I was saying that 39 miles is the average that Americans drive every day. And that constitutes something like 95% of their driving. And so an EV can often serve, that purpose and be charged at home. And then it's still more economical to then rent a vehicle for the times when you may have to travel, and because of the lifetime ownership costs, the lower lifetime ownership costs of EVs.
Okay.
Did that cover? I don't know where I left off. So is that close enough? Anyway.
That's great. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, so I don't see any more hands raised, but I do want to remind everyone that we do have some time left. If you do have any more questions, make sure to raise your hand. At the bottom of your screen, there's the reactions button, and that will have the hand raising option. Okay, I see Margaret Bell has a question or comment. Margaret, you can.
Yes, thank you. And like everybody else, I wanted to thank you for the presentation. Very educational, very informative. Thank you very much. Just wanted to add a couple of comments to what you've already received, and that is asking that you include the advanced clean truck standards in your petition this year, and that you also adopt a crediting standard that includes early action credits, but limits the use of the proportional credits in the Clean Cars 1 rulemaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Sandra or Claudia, do you have any comments on that?
No, I just appreciate those comments. Just want to say I appreciate those comments. We've received them in writing from a coalition of environmental groups, and we'll certainly be looking at those.
Great. So next up, I have a written comment in the chat. This is from William. On another subject, Gallup-McKinley is welcoming another Rhino glove factory that will use huge amounts of water, gas, and create lots of untreated chemical waste. Is NMED involved in approval? If not, where would concerned citizens ask about this?
So our involvement will depend on the type of environmental permits that are needed. This is not on my radar screen, which would but maybe it should be. If they need an air quality permit, if they're going to emit above a certain threshold, they'd have to seek an air quality permit, and there would be an opportunity for public participation to comment on that permit. If they need a water discharge permit, the groundwater permit unit would go there and look at that groundwater discharge permit. So what I might suggest, Will, is if you want to meet on this, go to the department website and ask for a meeting. There's a little button at the very bottom, and state what the subject is, and we'd be happy to meet with you separately on that and bring the appropriate people together. So if we need to talk about air permitting or groundwater discharge permitting or hazardous waste permitting, we can do that there. And there's it's a pretty easy process to just click on that button, ask for a meeting, and we'll get it set up for you.
Great. Thank you, Will, again for your comment. Next up, we have Jake McCook. Jake, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you so much for taking our questions and for your work on these issues. We're really excited about this. I'm a young New Mexican very interested in buying an EV. And my question is, if these rules will not go into effect until 2025, how can New Mexicans like myself interested in buying EVs now get more access to them between now and 2025 with the quotas being so low for New Mexico right now? Thank you.
Well, Jake, we don't have any quotas in New Mexico. You know, we have a sales rate of about 1%, but as I think Linda was saying, you know, she had to really go out of her way to get Crosstrek. I had to special order my plug-in Mini. Happy to have it. It's 4-wheel drive. It operates great. But I couldn't drive it off the floor, sales floor. I had to order it. So really right now, you could look at another clean car state, or you can order it special, like from Subaru or from Mini. But it's right now the selection that you have is not great. I do want to note though, Nambe Pueblo just opened up a Tesla dealership, right? So there's an opportunity there to provide the Pueblo with a little bit of extra revenue, and you can go test drive one over there.
And I'd also like to add something to that. So if you're not trying to buy it this year, the early credits that we mentioned is some flexibility that New Mexico has. As those years where the early credits are available to manufacturers, that will incentivize them to buy to deliver an electric vehicle. So we know that we can have those credits be available I'm going to talk calendar year now, 2023 and 2024. We don't know whether we can have them apply to 2022 as well with a little bit of retroactive. So that would be an example for you to, for example, provide perhaps testimony that said, we'd like to have those early credits as early as possible. So we might be able to get vehicles, incentivize delivering vehicles to New Mexico as soon as next year. So even though we can't adopt the rules for multiple years in the future, the early credits do incentivize manufacturers to deliver vehicles here sooner.
Well, I appreciate that very much. And yes, I'll definitely try to raise that point in as much as I can. If I can ask a quick follow-up question, what are you doing to sort of work with dealers in New Mexico to sort of get them ready for this and educate them on this, and especially have them give the right information to consumers? And I ask that because I've called around to several dealers in New Mexico and asked them about the opportunities for some of the vehicles that are either here now or on the way in the next year. And I've gotten a very cold response from them in saying, oh, you're only one of, you're one of the few that people ask about this. New Mexico's just not there yet. We have no infrastructure. We don't really have any plans to make this a priority. So, and that was the case for a lot of different dealerships around the state. So I'm wondering if there's anything we can do between now and when the rules go effect to sort of soften that message to consumers.
I want to say that we've been working with the New Mexico Auto Dealers Association. Ken Ortiz is on this call right now. We plan to meet with them regularly to let them know what we're thinking, get their thoughts on this. And I know he's been working with his dealers as well. Ken, do you want to add anything to that for Jake's question?
Sure, Sandra, thank you so much. And I appreciate the question. We have several dealerships in New Mexico that are certified by their manufacturer. They're willing and able to provide electric vehicles. Part of the challenge is, as we've all heard about, the chip shortage, which is affecting inventory. So I have my email next to my name, and I could also provide in the chat box a cell number. And I'd encourage any of you that are experiencing maybe a little bit of that difficulty to reach out to me, and I could kind of conversate with you of which make and models you're interested in. And I could reach out and coordinate, a conversation with some of our dealers who are certified and who do have some in stock. But the challenge is with the chip shortage, everybody is having really low inventory levels. So let me get my email and cell phone on the chat box, and I welcome any input or any conversations that I can help coordinate. Thank you, Sandra.
I also want to give a shout out to the city of Albuquerque. The city of Albuquerque has has some ambitious sustainability goals, including goals around transportation. And they see the situation that you just described, Jake, as one of the pieces to address. And so they have started a dealer training program, dealership training program. And if a dealership goes through this training program, they're considered a certified EV dealership. And so that is, through some incentivizing through training and through just the sharing of information. That's one thing that that they are looking at, and we are considering how we might make that go beyond the city of Albuquerque limits. And also, I want to say that Ken has been a great partner, and he understands that, for example, providing more information to his dealers, that we might provide them about EVs, about the, just to answer some of the questions that that the staff at dealerships might help them have an easier time answering questions when consumers like you walk in their door.
I appreciate that very much. And I think a list of those certified, EV dealerships would be really helpful. And that way we know to sort of who to go to if we're really interested in this. And Ken, I look forward to following up with you to help you get me a F-150 Lightning pickup when it comes out.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to our call.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you, Ken. So I have a question in the chat. This is from John. Doesn't always show me. It's from John. So John is asking, what plans are there for development of a workforce to support the EV transitions in New Mexico, i.e. mechanics, charger installers, et cetera? That's, yeah.
There's a great opportunity here. If we do get money from the reconciliation bill, and I believe we will, we need to be working with Workforce Solution and Economic Development, because that is definitely one of the benefits of moving forward with electric vehicles and pushing this trend forward is the job creation and the tools, helping people get the tools they need to step into those jobs. Claudia, do you have anything to add on that?
It's a great point, and I echo everything you said.
So Jake and everyone else, I put Ken Ortiz's contact information in the chat. If you would like to reach out to Ken, it should be in the chat. And I noticed that there are not any hands up, and I have no more questions from the chat. So I want to give everyone just a few more seconds or minutes to indicate that they have more questions. If not, I'll turn it back over to Sandra and Claudia. And just as a reminder, again, if you would like to ask a question, raising your hand is possible by clicking the reactions button at the bottom of your screen and selecting raising your hand.
Well, I just want to thank everybody for coming out this afternoon and listening to the presentation and being available and asking questions and making statements. It's working with you all that will help us get this rule right. And I look forward to the next public meeting after we get the draft rules in place and getting your comments on that. And I have to say, Caitlin, you did a great job today. Thank you. Claudia, you did a fantastic job. This is Claudia's third clean car presentation of the day. The other two were for tribal entities. So she's becoming a real expert here. Claudia?
Yeah, thanks. I want to thank all of you for joining us, and thank you for the thoughtful questions. I do want to, there was one question to me about whether this meeting has been recorded and will be available. Yes, it will, with the caveat that I think we started the recording a little bit into it. So we will definitely post the recording that we have. And thank you all again. And please reach out to me with any questions, any comments. large or small. My education on this is growing all the time, and I appreciate your tough questions to help me learn more.
I see we have one.
Yes, we do.
One hand raised from Benjamin Segovia. Benjamin, go ahead and unmute yourself.
I work for Farm Bureau and we're an advocacy group for agriculture. I have a question for farmers and ranchers that use farm equipment, and I realize that you, in your presentation, you say it doesn't apply to equipment, but how long would a farmer have, or a rancher, to continue using a fuel vehicle or fuel equipment as the electric vehicles start phasing in more and more? What's the anticipated time for them to be able to keep utilizing those equipments that they have or they might purchase? Any idea?
So, Benjamin, thanks for joining. I'm glad to see the Farm Bureau here. I'd like to hear more from you too as we go forward. And I haven't seen anything related to 100% electric equipment at this point. I know there's talk about heavy duty vehicles and moving heavy duty vehicles, but nothing related to, say, off-road tractors or combines. So I don't have a clue as to what the transition might be away from fuels, if there is one. I don't know if it's practical or not. For vehicles, for light duty vehicles, say for pickup trucks, I know there is some states, and including California and New York, have a goal of 100% EV sales by 2035. New Mexico hasn't made that commitment. We haven't bought into that yet, but I know that is something that's coming on the horizon. But we as a state have not bought into that yet. So, but that's definitely the trend. That's definitely where the country is headed, is for eventually to have all light duty vehicles be electric.
Correct. Great, thank you. I was just trying to anticipate for the agriculture industry to anticipate their transition, or this transitioning of a light duty truck. I can understand it's going to be used on the farm or the ranch. I'm talking about the combines. I'm talking about the cats, DC-10s, all that equipment that is used. What should the industry be preparing for is more of the, and like you said, you don't know, but that's okay. That's understandable. I just thought maybe you had an idea of how they would adapt. Thank you very much for the information.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Ben. So next up, I see Camilla Feibelman.
Well, I just, having heard the previous speaker's question, I mean, I did want to clarify, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but these rules don't talk about vehicles having to be retired. This is incentivizing percentage through sales. So I was hoping you could clarify that. Nobody's talking about people having to give up vehicles that they own or use.
Yeah, that's right, Camilla. And we did talk about that earlier. There's no mandate for anybody to buy a ZEV vehicle, period. Nobody has to do that. I think what Benjamin was trying to get at is future trends going out, and even then, we'll have used vehicles on the road for years to come, and it could be that eventually we will be able to go to 100% new vehicles will be electric, but we're certainly not at that point yet.
Right, and there have been interesting programs in the past where there have been incentive programs for people to, get a certain amount of money or credit if they want to retire vehicles, of a certain age through federal programs, but just seemed like something to double clarify just in case. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Camilla. Okay, so I'm not seeing any more hands, but please feel free in the next couple minutes to raise your hand and give any comments or ask any questions. And I do want to thank everyone for all of your participation. It's really wonderful to see so many questions and, you know, people participating in the chat and collaborating. It's really great to see that in public meetings. So thank you for all of your questions.
Okay, going once, going twice. I'm not trying to scare you away, but it doesn't seem like there's any more questions or comments, which we of course welcome. So thank you again. It was a pleasure spending an hour and a half with you, and we hope to see you at the next meeting as well.
Okay, thank you everyone, and make sure to check out the website and our press release. Have a great day.
Thank you all.
Bye.